Prison is undeniably one of the last places anyone would want to end up in, and today I will delve into prisons so horrifying that even the thought of wishing them on an enemy feels extreme. In this video, I'll take you through a tour of the 6 most fearsome prisons on Earth. Number 6. Tadmor Prison. Amid the stark Syrian desert, not far from Palmyra's famed ancient relics, lies Tadmor Prison, a name that sends chills down Syrian spines. While the world may associate Palmyra with its celebrated Greco-Roman ruins, the Arabic name Tadmor conjures images of suffering, death, and sheer brutality. Initially erected by the French in the 1930s, this desolate stronghold became infamous under Hafez al-Assad's iron rule. The prison's grim history is a chilling narrative of torment, executions, and cruelty over decades. When political unrest grew during the 1970s, fueled by calls for reform and representation, Tadmor became a weapon of the Assad regime to instill fear and maintain control. Activists, many from the Muslim Brotherhood and secular movements, found themselves detained and subjected to monstrous abuses. Thousands of detainees were executed outright or endured years of unspeakable torture, their lives a perpetual nightmare. For some, survival even for a short period was deemed miraculous, while others languished in this living hell for decades. Among the survivors was Salameh Kaileh, a Palestinian writer who endured 2 excruciating years within Tadmor's walls. Accused of defying the Ba'athist agenda, Kaileh lived through horrors he described as unfathomable. According to him, calling Tadmor a prison was an insult to the term. It was a place entirely void of rights, humanity, or mercy, leaving only anguish and terror. The zenith of Tadmor's brutality occurred during the late 1970s and early 1980s, as the regime targeted leftist and Islamist groups in a crackdown of unrelenting savagery. The infamous massacre of 1980, following an attempted assassination of Assad, remains one of Syria's darkest chapters. Rifat al-Assad's defense brigades descended on Tadmor, armed with machine guns, slaughtering prisoners cell by cell in a horrifying bloodbath. While the exact death toll remains unknown, Amnesty International estimated 500 to 1,000 lives were taken in minutes. Most were affiliated with or suspected of supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, their fates sealed by the regime's merciless grip. Tadmor's structure, designed as a panopticon, epitomized control and oppression, with every movement monitored. Its courtyards, dormitories, and cells became scenes of unimaginable suffering. Former inmate Salameh Kaileh described barbed wire-covered windows that seemed to mock any notion of freedom. Upon arrival, new prisoners were subjected to the so-called reception party, a savage initiation that left indelible scars. Survivors recall being whipped relentlessly after being dragged from buses, their ordeals marked by pain and dehumanization. One detainee recounted being beaten hundreds of times while forcibly confined within a car tire. This grotesque routine was only the beginning. Life inside Tadmor was a relentless cycle of beatings, humiliation, and psychological torment. Guards wielded unchecked power, indulging their sadistic whims with barbaric inventiveness. Prisoners were forced into degrading acts, stripped of all dignity in a reign of terror that defied comprehension. Kaileh described Tadmor as a kingdom of madness and death, a stain not just on Syria, but on all humanity. One survivor, Bakar, recounted a guard ordering a prisoner to move over 100 slippers using only his mouth, a cruel game that lasted an entire night. When the Islamic State captured Tadmor, they exposed its grim interiors, a stark revelation of its dark legacy. Ultimately, even the Islamic State found the site so vile they demolished it in 2015. Number 5. Black Dolphin Prison. In Russia's cold heartland, near the border with Kazakhstan, Black Dolphin Prison looms as a fortress of despair and punishment. This institution houses the most malevolent criminals, including serial killers, terrorists, and cannibals responsible collectively for over 3,500 deaths. Here, life is reduced to a regimented and controlled existence, monitored to the most minute detail. Prisoners are blindfolded upon arrival, forced to walk bent at the waist, ensuring they cannot discern their surroundings. Every aspect of their existence is tightly controlled, stripping them of freedom, privacy, and hope. Meals consist of solitary servings of bread and soup, consumed in isolation, without any semblance of companionship. Guards patrol every 15 minutes, ensuring no moment of reprieve or solace for the inmates. Black Dolphin's inmates face constant surveillance, a stark reminder of their grim fates. For some, their crimes reflect the darkest corners of human depravity, as in the case of one man who committed murder and cannibalism. In a chilling confession, he described boiling and frying human flesh, even sharing it with unsuspecting acquaintances who thought it was kangaroo meat. Escape from Black Dolphin is not an option. The prison's security measures ensure absolute control. Its walls, cameras, and guards create an environment where survival hinges on obedience and endurance. Inmates endure a relentless routine, stripped of identity and humanity, in a facility designed to break the spirit entirely. One might assume that inmates at Black Dolphin would be resigned to their fate, yet guards have observed them engaging in acts of calculated defiance. Some prisoners will intentionally harm themselves, slicing veins in protest or out of despair. Others exploit any oversight by guards, attempting to pass messages or contraband, despite the ever-present surveillance. Reports describe the haunting silence of Black Dolphin, broken only by the shuffling steps of inmates escorted in handcuffs and blindfolds. With no access to the outside world, prisoners face a form of living death, marked by their crimes and their grim sentences. Visits from family members are exceedingly rare, and when allowed, they are strictly supervised, further underscoring the inmate's isolation. The structure of Black Dolphin itself adds to its unrelenting severity. Every corridor, every cell, and every corner of this fortress is a testament to the Russian penal system's focus on control and punishment over rehabilitation. For those held here, time drags on as a monotonous, endless punishment. Guards ensure no personal connections form, stripping prisoners of the faintest semblance of human warmth. In the rare instances where prisoners are transferred or released upon completion of their sentences, they emerge as shadows of their former selves. The relentless regimen and extreme conditions leave psychological scars that rarely heal. Number 4. ADX Florence. In the United States, ADX Florence represents the apex of high-security imprisonment. Located in Colorado, this supermax facility was built to contain the nation's most dangerous criminals, including terrorists, gang leaders, and mass murderers. Known for its extreme measures of isolation, ADX Florence is a prison where time stands still, and freedom is a distant memory. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, with only an hour of heavily monitored outdoor time. This outdoor space, often referred to as the concrete pit, disorients prisoners and underscores their complete separation from the outside world. Built as a response to violent incidents in other prisons, ADX Florence is a fortress of control where even fleeting human interaction is a privilege. Surveillance is relentless, with motion detectors, cameras, and pressure pads ensuring no escape is possible. Meals are delivered directly to cells, further limiting any sense of community or connection. Over time, compliant inmates may earn limited privileges, but the psychological toll of such isolation leaves an indelible mark. For many, ADX Florence is more than a prison. It is the embodiment of absolute confinement and control. Inside ADX Florence, the solitary cells are designed for maximum isolation. Each cell measures just 7 by 12 feet, with concrete furniture and a small window positioned too high to offer a view of the outside world. Even these minimal windows are angled to prevent any inmate from glimpsing the sky, reinforcing their sense of confinement. Prisoners eat their meals in silence, delivered through slots in the doors, with no opportunity to interact with others. The isolation at ADX Florence is so profound that even the guards speak minimally to the inmates. This enforced solitude, day after day, chips away at the prisoner's mental health, creating a psychological toll that is impossible to ignore. ADX Florence houses some of the most infamous criminals in modern history, including members of international terrorist organizations and high-profile domestic offenders. The facility's strict protocols ensure that every movement is observed, and any form of resistance is immediately subdued. Despite its reputation as a supermax prison, ADX Florence has been the subject of criticism from human rights organizations. They argue that the extreme isolation amounts to psychological torture, leaving inmates to face the deterioration of their mental health without adequate support. In rare cases, prisoners who display good behavior may be moved to less restrictive environments, but this process is long and arduous. Critics point to the lack of rehabilitation opportunities within ADX Florence, emphasizing that the focus on punishment comes at the expense of reform. The conditions here serve as a stark reminder of the extremes of the U.S. justice system. For many inmates, this facility is not just a prison, it is a place where hope is extinguished and humanity is stripped away entirely. Number 3. La Santé Prison. Renowned for its persistent violence and frequent riots, Fort-Lanté Prison stands as a symbol of disorder and unrest within the French penal system. Constructed on the grounds of an old coal market, Fort-Lanté evolved from its origins as the Médaillon Convent into a prison during the tumultuous French Revolution. Prior to its transformation, it functioned as the Maison de Lanté, an institution established under the orders of Anne of Austria. In later years, the facility was incorporated into the Sainte Anne Hospital Center, where its purpose shifted once more, culminating in the year 1899 when it began a new chapter. This period marked the transfer of prisoners from the dismantled Grand Rocket Prison, increasing the facility's capacity from 500 to 1,000 cells. Over time, the prison expanded both in scale and in notoriety, becoming a stronghold of confinement for countless inmates. The prison's layout divided detainees into 14 separate divisions, each one existing under the oppressive shadow of its fortress-like walls. Individual cells measured 4 meters in length, 2.5 meters in width, and 3 meters in height, symbolizing the limited freedoms granted to those within. Once a grim icon of retribution, the prison even housed a guillotine, prominently located at the crossroads of Rue de Lanté and Boulevard Arago. At this exact intersection, a man named Jorge Duchman faced execution in 1909 for the murder of his own mother, marking one of the prison's first such events in over a decade. The walls bore silent witness to life's harshest extremes, such as the 1932 pardon of Eugene Bohr and the executions of the Wehr brothers in 1940. During the German occupation, the facility saw not only common criminals, but also 18 resistance fighters and communists sacrificed within its grim confines. As societal views on punishment began to shift, the prison found itself increasingly scrutinized, particularly following Veronique Wasser's shocking revelations in 2000. Within days of starting her tenure, Dr. Wasser encountered horrors that defied imagination, including inmates swallowing forks, poison, and caustic substances out of sheer despair. Overcrowding, extreme heat that surpassed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and rampant skin diseases, exacerbated by infrequent showers, made life unbearable. Rodents infested the cells, prompting prisoners to stuff cracks in the walls with their clothing in futile attempts to keep them at bay. The mattresses, teeming with lice and other vermin, served as a breeding ground for infection, while a sinister hierarchy emerged among the inmates, with weaker individuals coerced into servitude by their more dominant cellmates. Dr. Wasser's courageous disclosures reached the public, triggering outrage and forcing France's Justice Minister, Elisabeth Guigou, to acknowledge the dire state of the nation's prison system. Shockingly, nearly half of the inmates had neither been tried nor convicted, undermining the very principles of justice and human rights that France once championed. The European Court of Human Rights condemned the prison's deplorable conditions, emphasizing the toll they took on detainees' mental and physical well-being. In 1999, the prison recorded 124 suicides, making it one of Europe's deadliest penitentiaries. A stark contrast to the reported 24 suicides among California's inmate population of 160,000 that same year. Local jails in America, however, were known to contribute significantly to these statistics, illustrating a broader global problem. French investigative magistrates exercised unchecked authority, often detaining suspects without trial or bail for months on end. This reality created a chilling environment in which untried individuals languished for an average of 4 months, sometimes far longer, only to be released when evidence proved insufficient. Disturbingly, these detainees often shared cells with hardened criminals, further eroding the presumption of innocence, a cornerstone of democratic legal systems. As Dr. Veronique Wasser poignantly observed, it is impossible to witness such horrors and remain silent. A petition signed by prominent figures, including ex-ministers, business leaders, and activists like José Bové, decried the systemic issues plaguing the prison. Their demands included improved healthcare, addressing rampant abuse, and ending humiliations suffered by inmates and their visiting families. The prison's environment was characterized as a breeding ground for crime rather than a place of rehabilitation, perpetuating cycles of suffering and despair. Former inmates, including high-profile figures like Jean-Michel Bouéron, recounted the horrors they endured, from tear gas seeping into cells to the psychological torment of confinement. Even cultural icons like poets Paul Verlaine and Guillaume Apollinaire, as well as infamous figures like Carlos the Assassin, left their marks on the prison's infamous history. Executions of resistance fighters during World War II and public hangings at its gates further cemented its grim legacy. One inmate, arrested on drug charges, lamented the prison's dire state, describing it as disgusting and lacking basic medical care. With month-long waits for a dentist, rotten food led to outbreaks of skin diseases, and guards' brutality often exacerbated inmates' suffering. Dr. Wasser's accounts of abuse included an inmate discovered severely dehydrated after being left in a punishment cell without water for 15 days. Other cases saw prisoners with lung diseases placed in cells near damp laundry rooms, aggravating their conditions. Some guards were reported to coerce inmates into sexual acts, and in one horrific instance, a 21-year-old was raped by 2 older cellmates on his first night. The horrors endured within Forlante's walls stood as a stark indictment of a system in desperate need of reform. Number 2. Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp. Established in 2002 under the administration of U.S. President George W. Bush, the Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp has been a focal point of controversy and intense debate. Its inception, rooted in the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 attacks, intertwined security concerns with pressing human rights issues. By March 2022, the facility had held 780 detainees, serving as a mirror to the geopolitical and social turbulence of the 21st century. Among those, 741 individuals were transferred elsewhere, 30 remained in custody, and 9 lost their lives within its confines. The camp operated under a chilling premise. Detainees were held indefinitely and interrogated without trial. This concept of indefinite detention provoked global condemnation, with organizations like Amnesty International branding the facility as a profound violation of human rights. Similarly, the Center for Constitutional Rights openly questioned the camp's adherence to the Due Process Clause enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. In July 2004, a classified report surfaced, its contents leaked to the New York Times, exposing a harrowing reality. Allegations of solitary confinement, degrading treatment, and extreme temperature manipulation were confirmed by Red Cross inspectors. They described the system as deliberately designed to torment detainees, a calculated mechanism of psychological and physical cruelty. The accounts revealed detainees were subjected to ear-splitting noise, frigid temperatures, and severe physical abuse. An internal memo from November 2004, later leaked to the press, corroborated these findings, shedding light on widespread inhumane practices. A particularly chilling account emerged in a 2005 New York Times opinion piece detailing an incident from July 29, 2004. An FBI agent reported entering an interrogation room to find a detainee chained hand and foot in a fetal position, lying on the floor with no access to food, water, or a chair. The detainee had soiled themselves and had been left in that state for over 18 hours. The subsequent investigation, led by Air Force Lieutenant General Randall Schmidt, delved into the reported abuses. His inquiry confirmed that a Saudi detainee, Mohammed al-Qahtani, who was often referred to as the 20th hijacker of the September 11th attacks, had endured inhumane treatment. Through prolonged and relentless interrogations, al-Qahtani was subjected to degrading techniques authorized by the Pentagon. Released detainees later recounted their suffering, detailing severe beatings, sleep deprivation, forced confinement in excruciating positions, and extended hooding. They also reported cultural and sexual humiliation, the administration of forced enemas, and psychological abuse that left lasting scars. One infamous incident involved Army Specialist Sean Baker, who posed as a detainee during a training exercise. The session escalated into a brutal assault, leaving Baker with brain injuries and seizures. In 2004, the New York Times reported that, of the nearly 600 detainees held at Guantanamo, only a few dozen had verifiable connections to al-Qaeda, and the intelligence gleaned from interrogations was limited. By 2006, Mohammed al-Qahtani was considered the camp's most high-profile detainee, believed to have been linked to planning the 9/11 attacks. His detention highlighted the facility's harsh practices. Al-Qahtani endured severe mistreatment, including excessive intravenous fluids and denial of restroom access, forcing him to soil himself. Waterboarding sessions and sleep deprivation through loud music were routine, with interrogations lasting up to 12 hours beginning at midnight. Psychological tactics compounded the cruelty. He was intimidated by military dogs, forced to salute while the U.S. national anthem played, and humiliated with images of 9/11 victims displayed on his body. His beard and hair were shaved as an insult to his religious beliefs, and he faced demeaning acts such as wearing a bra and being smeared with fake menstrual blood. These incidents were detailed in interrogation logs partially released in 2005, which documented al-Qahtani's ordeal as Detainee 063. In David Mulan's book Whose God Rules, further disturbing accounts emerged, including a female interrogator who pretended to menstruate and used a red substance resembling menstrual blood to prevent a detainee from praying. Reports of Quran desecration fueled widespread riots and mass suicide attempts, reflecting the extent of detainee despair. A leaked FBI email from December 2003 revealed that Defense Department interrogators at Guantanamo impersonated FBI agents while employing torture tactics, intensifying outrage. Despite mounting evidence, Vice President Dick Cheney defended the camp's operations in a 2005 CNN interview, asserting that detainees were treated better than in any other nation. In stark contrast, former President Jimmy Carter, writing for the New York Times in 2012, condemned the facility's reliance on waterboarding and intimidation, denouncing these practices as unacceptable violations of human rights. Number 1. Bangkwang Central Prison. Located on the outskirts of Bangkok, Thailand, Bangkwang Central Prison has earned a global reputation as one of the most brutal correctional facilities in existence. Established by King Ramaphivip between 1927 and 1931, the prison was intended to house only the most serious offenders, including those awaiting death sentences. Prisoners condemned to death were permanently shackled until their execution, a practice that added both physical and psychological weight to their punishment. Over time, Bangkwang gained notoriety for its inhumane treatment of inmates, often leaving them broken physically and mentally. Inmates endured grueling conditions from the outset. For the first 3 months of incarceration, prisoners were forced to wear heavy leg irons, severely limiting their mobility and morale. The facility housed both Thai and foreign inmates, many of whom recounted harrowing tales of survival. The prison operated under an internal class system known as the Chit system, which dictated the quality of life for inmates. Basic sustenance included a single bowl of rice and vegetables, with wealthier prisoners buying additional food or paying others to perform labor on their behalf. The conditions within the prison were so dire that foreign inmates began organizing charity initiatives to raise funds for food and medical supplies. Despite some reforms, such as the cessation of welding shackles to death row prisoners' legs in 2013, the prison remained an emblem of cruelty. Former inmate Warren Fellows, in his book The Damage Done, described Bangkwang as the Big Tiger, a nickname reflective of its predatory environment that consumed inmates' bodies and spirits. Another inmate, Alan John Davies, a UK citizen sentenced to death in Thailand, endured 17 years in Bangkwang before receiving a royal pardon in 2007. Bangkwang also housed Thailand's execution chamber and maintained its role as the primary detention center for men on death row. In 2018, it housed approximately 6,000 prisoners, many of whom faced lengthy sentences or awaited execution. In a 2013 landmark decision, prison officials released 563 inmates from their shackles as a gesture of reform, though many death row prisoners remained bound. Despite such efforts, the prison's harsh conditions continued to define its global infamy. Known in Western circles as the Bangkok Hilton, the prison gained widespread attention through a fictional Australian television series, loosely based on the real-life horrors of Bangkwang. The show, featuring actors like Nicole Kidman and Hugo Weaving, brought the brutal reality of Thai prison life to Western audiences. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.